Great. So I've got a few questions for Max and also for Mike. So if anyone has any questions for Jess, please do send them through. So the first question I have for Max is, do you think that set-stocked cattle tend to spend time around hedgerows, which results in increased bat presence? If mob grazing systems were combined with agroforestry systems or orchards, would you expect this to increase bat abundance? And that's actually from Anna.
Yeah, really interesting questions. I think you might be right. I think cattle, especially during the peak of the summer, they tend to aggregate around shaded spots. So when they're in a rotation system or they're paddocked off in the center of a field, they're less likely to have access to shade. Although the rate of rotation, especially in mob graze systems, it's often very fast. I mean, there's some that get rotated multiple times a day, 3 or 4 paddocks a day, in automated systems. And so eventually they will have access to sheltered features or shaded areas. But I think there's just not a lot known about agroforestry systems and how they might benefit greater horseshoe bats. And I think looking at things like orchards, which a few people have spoken about previously, there is some value in these types of farming systems for bats, given that they provide greater linear features and roosting opportunities. So, but I think, yeah, the shading opportunities are quite important for cattle, and so it provides both a linear feature for the bats to navigate the landscape, but also potentially an aggregation of dung that can provide good food sources.
Great, thank you for that. Our next question is from Julian, who asks, Max, if the insects are mobile, how sure can you be that there is a correlation between land management and recorded insect samples?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's important to highlight that we don't know a lot about the dispersal of dung beetles. There's very little work on it. I've spoken to a few people that work on dung beetles, and they're keen to explore it further, but we just don't know a lot about that. What you probably can be sure of is that if you are sampling dung beetles within a field, that sample will be representative of what's going on in that field, or it should be a good representation of what's going on in that field. Obviously, when you use baited traps, you're going to attract things into the field, but largely, it should be a good representation of what's going on. And as for moths, again, there's far more known about the dispersibility of moths, given that they migrate long distances, some species, and so that is a more challenging thing to justify, especially using things like light traps that can attract species from very long distances. Another challenging thing to justify, but again, I think if you are putting and sampling invertebrates from our field, regardless of their ability to disperse, the management of the land itself, especially for ground-dwelling invertebrates like the Onthophagus species, I think you can be more confident that is going to be representative, and that the influence of land management is going to have an impact on the invertebrates that you're monitoring there.
Great, thank you. Got a few questions for Mike now. So Mike, Phil asks, what would you like to see in the new ELM scheme?
How long have we got? Yeah, can I be cheeky and say funding for land advisors to go out and give do farm plans for farmers? That'd be good. I think it's a tricky one. I think one of the problems with the scheme is that lots of great aspects to it, but I think you almost need a bit more sort of flexibility somehow. So I think you need to try and build in some kind of local variability, or that ability to have more kind of locally focused and locally built up schemes, rather than obviously the current schemes that's sort of done nationally. So I think more. Yeah, and also I think the way things are going with payment schemes, it's looking more, farmers are going to be paid more for some environmental work they're doing, which is obviously that's great if they're being encouraged to do those sorts of schemes. So I think anything where that could be encouraged, and we can be working with those landowners to help make sure that the sort of the local needs of that landscape and the species that are living there are sort of fully addressed, and that I say there is that kind of local ability to focus on a few key species that are in a certain geography. I think would probably be, if that could be improved upon on the current sort of national scheme, that would be great. But yeah, I think that's probably one for me, and yeah, kind of a longer chat with Phil about that one later on, I think.
Great, thank you. And leading on from that, really, Julian asks, there has been a reliance upon agri-environment to deliver conservation outcomes since the early 90s. Are there alternative mechanisms for the delivery of conservation that offer greater habitat continuity that greater horseshoe bats clearly favour?
Yeah, I think, as you say, that's kind of following on, isn't it? And sort of goes back to perhaps what I was saying about that, being able to have more of a local kind of focus, so that if in a particular area, it made more sense to, manage some of these areas kind of less intensively, and not talking about rewilding, anything like that, or particularly sort of it gets a whole kind of wider discussion there. But if there could be more, as I say, that kind of local variation, we can just say, okay, these kind of valley systems here would be really useful to kind of strengthen these habitat connections. We know there's bat roosts here, or other key species using these areas. So let's really look at what they need and try and make sure that's that's addressed. So I think, yeah, perhaps not quite as prescriptive as perhaps some of it currently is, and perhaps more of a focus on where are we trying to get to, and what would we like to see the landscape looking like at the end of a certain time period. So perhaps a little bit more, as I say, flexibility in the way that the scheme is delivered.
Great, thank you. Let's have a look at the other questions. I'm not sure if you covered this, sorry, Mike, but Robin asks, how many years did that field take to develop into a species-rich meadow?
I think I did say, did I? Yeah, so that meadow was sown, I think, in February, March 2016, I think. So yes, that's, I know. So the before photo was just before that. So that the photo just of the ploughed fields probably, just before that took place, beginning of end of 2015, beginning of 2016, and then the after photos there were from earlier this year, I think. So that sort of was 4 years on. It is an interesting one, because it's when I sort of look, it doesn't kind of look quite like sort of natural sort of meadow in a way. It's, I think, because these meadows, when they do some meadow creation, it takes time to really kind of to develop, and over sort of the course of the years, you tend to get particular species will have a real flush, and 1 year you get a load of one thing, the next year you get a load of another species will come in, and then so after a while it kind of settles down, and after several years you tend to get more of a even kind of balance of species perhaps. But at the moment you've got these real flushes of real kind of like dense trefoils and knapweed vetches and things like that, which is amazing. But I expect probably over the next few years that it might change its character slightly, and you may get a few different species coming in, and the structure might change a little bit as it develops. But yes, in answer to the question, it was 4 years from sowing to those after photos were 4 years later.
Oh, thank you very much. Let's check the time. Okay, we've got time for a few more questions. So let's have a look here. Oh, Max, here's a question from you, from Nick. He asks, what was the physical setup for the paired detectors so that you could be confident that you were recording the same bat across the 2 meters? Okay,
so what I used is 2 microphones were plugged into the same detector unit. And so the time was synchronized, so there wasn't any difference. I didn't have to synchronize 2 detectors. And the microphones were positioned at around between 10 and 15 meters apart. So you can be very, very confident that you will be getting the same bat. And if you look at the audio files, it is pretty obvious. However, it probably will be a sensible idea to sort of verify that by using something like some video footage, just to pair it alongside some audio files. And so that's something I'll probably look at doing in the future, just to verify that is the case.
Cool, thank you for that. Yeah, I've done similar stuff in the past with 2 mics, and I've always wondered really whether it's the same bat or whether it's not, but haven't had the video stuff to support that. So yeah, that'd be interesting to see. Right, let's have another look. Got a question from David here. Max, interesting to see that permanent pasture wasn't better in all aspects compared to lays, perhaps due to the more varied structure of lays. Do you think the best option is permanent pasture with a varied structure?
I think it's probably a good idea to make sure that we have a varied structure of vegetation regardless. I think there's growing movements for uncultivated edges around fields and things like this that can provide a variety of different habitats for invertebrates. I think that's the key here, is making sure that there is some variation. I think within permanent pasture, you do typically find that given that the cattle have free access to the field, it tends to get grazed to a pretty even level throughout the field. And I think that will create issues for things like moths, especially given they spend a lot of time in denser vegetation. But as I said, again, it's also considering the wider landscape features like woodlands and hedgerows as well, given that they're going to play a really important role.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I've got quite a few other questions for you and Mike, but I've just seen a question for Jess now. So this is from Valerie. She says, Jess, county wildlife sites clearly have a role to play. What other areas or approaches do you think should be prioritised with regards to NRN?
Thanks. So NRN are the nature recovery networks. I'm afraid that's not something that I've been working on this year, but county wildlife sites are really important for creating those stepping stones that can connect our areas. So connecting, networking. Although they're not statutory sites, just having that link with the landowners to keep them under positive management is really important to help connect our actual statutory sites, as I mentioned in the talk. I'm sorry that's not a fully rounded answer, but I can look into it more for you.
No, that's good. Thank you very much. Let's have another look. We've got another question for you. Not yet. So if anyone has any last minute questions for Jess, let me know. Right, I think I've got another question. Let's go back to Mike, if that's all right.
What's the connection?
Thank you.
Here's a question from Stephen to you, Mike. Has your work involved advice on managing buildings and creating night roost, etc., for greater horseshoe bats?
Yeah, probably not specifically on the night roost side of things. I mean, we have. So for those of you that were here yesterday and heard Pete Youngman's talk about a new bat roost in East Devon that we've helped to build. So there's a site there. So that's very close to the maternity roost in Southley over in East Devon. The building's in state of disrepair. So we decided that we'd look for another location close to that roost, an area that we knew bats were using, good habitat, and a very willing and accommodating landowner. So we helped to give advice and help with working with East Devon AOMB on that project. Also helps another roost creation project, again over in East Devon. Been working with the RSPB on that one. So we've helped fund that. And then also down in South Devon, we've done a little bit of kind of roost sort of enhancement works and roost creation there. So yes, we do look for opportunities for sort of bat roost creation or modifying existing structures. So we probably haven't done any specifically for night roosts. Obviously, we're hoping that some of the the larger buildings that we've done will be used as night roosts as well. So parts of the buildings. But it is certainly something that as we're going around, and if we find that potentially be a good location, we would definitely explore those opportunities if we felt it was a good idea. And so we have been building some, funding some roost creation across our roost zones as well.
Great, thanks, Mike.